Hi everybody. Today we will be covering the topic of market research. Right, so objectives of this chapter or this topic is for you to be able to learn how to do the market research, or at least understand the concept or the process of doing the market research. All right. So let's get right to it. Here's all the steps that you have to go through when it comes to creating the market research. Where, as you can see, it's not that simple, but at the same time, it's not too complicated either. So let's start with the first one first. The first thing that you need to think about would be, define the research problem. Right? Without the whole purpose of doing the research is for you to be able to find the answer of certain problem. So without the problem at the first place, there's no need to do the research, right? So for example, it could be something like, your restaurant has been doing well for a while now, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, people stop coming. Right? So that's the problem. You want to be able to figure out why people don't come to your restaurants anymore, right? So that's the very, very first step. It's when you try to see what the problem that you have for you to be able to decide, all right, we need to do some research to find out the answer for that. Then you move on to the next steps. It's to determine the research design. And the research designs are different kinds of different designs of research. Right? And there are three main kinds of them, and they all serve different purposes. The first one, exploratory research. This is when you try to find all of the possible answers. It's like brainstorming, where you try to find all of the possible ones. Some of them are the one relevant, some not so much. So in this case, you can do something like focus groups. You can do some case studies, some personal interview. Maybe like simply asking participants, why you don't want to come to my restaurant anymore, right? And you get so many different kind of answers. Right? There's so many different reasons why people don't come to the restaurants, and that's the whole purpose of doing exploratory research. You want all of the possible explanation, and then you try to narrow them down later. Another kind of research we call this descriptive research. This is very systematic. The results tend to be in the quantitative form. In terms of you get to see numbers, something you can count. And for example, you can see how often consumers come to your restaurant this week by counting them, right? Or how many of them, right? 10 people, 20 people, 30 people. Next kind of research we call the causal research. This is when you try to connect the dot, reason and the results, cause and effect. Right? So you want to see what caused this to happen. Next, you move on to step number 3. This is when you try to choose what would be the good method to collect the data. There are two kinds of data. One we call the primary data, and the other one we call the secondary data. For the first one, let's start with the first one first, the secondary data. The secondary data is a more simple kind of data because somebody else already collected that for you. So all you need to do is to try to find the access to the data. Quite often they're free. Sometimes you have to pay to get access to a certain database. So that's what we call the secondary data. Then we have the primary data. This is when you, a researcher, collects the data yourself. The benefit of using primary data is that you get the exact data that you would like or you would need for your research. Right? So the results that come out will be better, more accurate versus the secondary data. There are pros and cons of using these two kinds of data. Secondary data, because somebody else collected that for you. So even though the results or the data looks like something you can use, however, it may not be the most accurate, right? Because somebody else, when they collect the data, they may have different purposes of collecting that data. So the results in the end, after you use the data, may not be the most accurate. However, it's very convenient it's easy to obtain. Second kind of data are the primary data. Pros and cons of using this kind of data is that because you collect that yourself, you can control a lot of things, right? So the data that you get will be more accurate to your research. But at the same time, it takes longer. Imagining you try to collect surveys from 1,000 people. It might take a while, several weeks or months before you can collect all of that information. Here's some of the methods that you use in order to collect the primary data. Right? We have the questionnaire, the telephone interviews, online questionnaire, which has become more and more popular. Then we have the face-to-face interviews. Right? The kind of question is also important as well. Open-ended question, multiple choice question, scale response questions. All right. You can look in the slides, and I provided you some of the examples of the slides that you could, some of the questions that you could use in the survey. We also have another kind of a primary data collection. We call it observational methods. This is when you observe people, right? Whether you let them know or not. Sometimes you just, you tell them that, okay, you're going to observe, what they are doing. Sometimes you just, discreetly observe them. The results from these two kinds will be quite different. When people know that they are being observed, they are being looked at, they may behave differently than when they don't know that there's somebody looking or observing them. All right, then you move on to the next step, which is when you try to decide, okay, what would be the sample of your research. There are two kinds, probability sample and non-probability samples. The probability samples, we are talking about the method that all of the participants have the same chance or equal chance of being chosen for the research. So it's basically random, right? You randomly choose people. Then we have the non-probability sample. This is when you collect when you gather the participants based on how convenient it is. You may choose students in your class. I may choose students in my class, or you may choose your family members because it's easy for you to get access to them. Then after you decide, all right, I want to use this method, I'm going to collect the data from this so-and-so participants, then you collect the data. By doing this data collection, some problems could happen as well, especially when you try to do that with participants from other countries. Because of the different cultures and languages, right? Doing the data collection or gather the data might be some difficulty. After you collect the data, then next you have to analyze, interpret the data. Right? After you collect the data, you get all of these different numbers that you need to know the method how to analyze the data. And in the end, when you get the final results, you need to be able to interpret that results too. Because not everybody knows how to do market research. Right? So if they hire you to do this market research, you have to provide them the interpretation of the results. What does it mean? What do these numbers mean? And in the end, this is the final steps of doing the market research. This is when you create the report. Basically, you create an executive summary, what's happening from the beginning until the end, right? Describe some of the methods that you use, who are these participants, the results, the limitation of the study, and in the end, you need to also provide some conclusions and some recommendations too. So if I go back to the example I gave you at the beginning, why people stop coming to your restaurant. So in the end, after you do the research, you'll be able to figure out what caused people from not coming to your restaurant. It could be because of they get tired of the menus, or it could be because of the quality goes down, or it could be because if somebody else new new restaurant just opened around the corner. So people go there instead of yours. So this is the answers you would like to get for your original problems. Right. So please read more details about this on the book, and I have some exercises for you guys to do as well for this. So please do that, and then we'll meet again next time. Thank you.